great information and covered a lot of ground, a lot of different areas that they've been working on there at their pill and DNA team. So now is the fun part, the interactive piece that you've all been sitting listening to some great information. We've got about 45 minutes or so left in the breakout session here today. We've got some graduate students, Ty and Gustavo, have some microphones. They're on, fully charged up, so they are not going to run dead in the next 45 minutes. So we'll start off and have some discussion, some dialogue. If anybody has any questions for speakers, follow-ups, but really the goal here of the first part of our discussion here is to talk through some shared experiences. What have you seen? What have you tried in your businesses, your production system, with your producers? And what's worked? What hasn't worked? Where are some areas that collectively we can prioritize and learn from each other's experiences and ultimately learn from that and improve what we do. Then as we wrap up the conversation, we'll shift a little bit and try to gather some thoughts and feedback on what are some of those priorities or research areas where more work needs to be done. You as attendees in the audience, what would you challenge for us as researchers and the students that are involved in the project? What do we need to do moving forward to move the needle here specifically on the nursery livability piece? So with that, microphones are primed up, ready to go. If anybody has any questions, thoughts of what we've got here with shared experiences on the nursery livability side. Yeah. Yep.
I have a question for Dr. Christine. I would like to know, maybe I missed it, maybe you already talked about it, but I had to go out, but I want to know what is your procedures or your process for creep feeding in the farmhouse?
Yeah, so our standard, this trial was 7 days pre-weaning that we did. I would say we're probably closer to 10 days pre-weaning, and a lot of that depends a little bit on wean age. So our farms where we're a 21 day wean age, we're maybe getting 7 days. Farms where we're closer to a 24-day wean age, we're getting closer to 10 days. But one way that we manage that is we do track our creep feed budget. So we get a weekly report of all farms and look at like a 6-week rolling average of creep feed budget. And we've got people who track that pretty closely just to make sure that farms are actually doing it. And the creep feeding would be about a ½ pound per day. If they have time to do morning and evening, they will. But I think it's less about quantity and more about just getting used to getting that feed in, kind of getting that gut prepared for solid feed. So there may be a little bit of variability there.
Is that coming in a bulk, distributed with a cart?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So that was a big investment that we decided to make. So for biosecurity, we were concerned about bringing bagged feed in. So we did put, we've got like a 2-ton bin that we added for creep feed. And then, yeah, they would cart that from room to room.
Do you have, do you use like stage 1 feed or?
We had been using our early wean diet, which is about an 18, I don't know, Steve, you can fix all my errors later. I think it was 18% lactose, and then we've recently gone away to that, so we want to match what they're starting with, so it'd be our N1 diet is the creep feed that we're using today. Yep.
On your information you showed after giving Palmitil to the sows, we saw the benefit in early and mid-nursery pigs. Does any of that benefit continue throughout?
Yeah, that's a good, so the question was, do we see continued finishing benefit with the Palmitil treatment? And we do. So that particular trial, we did a finishing feed trial on the backside of that, so the data is a little bit skewed on net difference. But yes, the treatment trends continued, the performance trends continued all the way through marketing. Yeah.
The alkaline detergent followed by the hot water pressure washing on the surface, is there ever a point where that flooring is raised because the biofilm will migrate, from the undersurface up? Do you ever, once a year or something, clean the underside?
We, like traditionally, no, we would not do any type of intensive cleaning, but if we're gonna do like a depop and restock with a new health status, then we would do more of like a pit wash, and we'd add in a formaldehyde disinfection to hopefully get under those slats. But no, we typically would just do a traditional just surface wash. Yep.
You do the formaldehyde, you know, it goes aqueous, it moves through, you know, that's the one safe thing about it is the damn stuff evaporates. But handling it liquid is dangerous.
We hire a professional. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to first start by thanking the team at Pill, and that's a phenomenal set of data. And I think we can all look in the mirror and say, hey, how are we executing those technical pieces and helping our team members in the field every day? A lot of good info. Christine, the question I had for you guys, because historically, anything that we do that helps improve survivability of those at-risk, smaller, suspect populations, we typically see our average performance of the population or group lower. So the challenge I would have for you guys, and if you're individually capturing the population information, is as I save more of those pigs, do my average exit weights drop? Do my average daily gains lower? Because I kind of looked at your data and I thought, well, heck, I may have gotten some advantage in sorting those pigs and graduating out of my pen later. So that was kind of one of the interesting things I thought from your data. And then on the rotavirus front, do I have more of those susceptible pigs left that are continuing to replicate or push that pathogen in the environment? So, but really interesting data set.
Yeah, I appreciate that feedback. I think that's something that we have, that individual pig data, and that's over the next few weeks, we're going to look into that and see, okay, are the improvements on the pigs that got polled, are the improvements on the Gen Pop pigs, and then we do have the individual finishing performance on those, and would love to track that through, because that's where the money is. Yeah.
Christine, great work on the sanitation piece. Did you guys explore anything from water line sanitation or water quality?
So that the case study that we talked about where Nathaniel went and worked with that barn, on that piece we did. So especially where we have an E. coli, F18 E. coli challenge, like a chronic challenge, we do implement a waterline sanitation. I think a lot of what we're using, it's like a peracetic acid peroxide combo. I don't have great data on that, but that was utilized in a lot of those F18 cleanups.
Hi, Dr. Christine. Thanks for the presentation. I noticed in some of your data, just some context here, we're also running a couple case studies and trying to assess the impact of technologies and strategies on mortality, is that it's really hard to get statistically significant information when it comes to mortality just because of the natural variation. And if you throw in PERS, you're trying to find a 1 or 2% improvement in mortality when you can get groups that come in at 30, 40%, other groups that come in at 5%. So how would you recommend we interpret like mortality changes when like the statistical significance is harder to see?
We spend hours debating that internally. Yeah, I think we were talking yesterday to pick up like a 0.5% difference in mortality. We're going to have to put like 20,000 pigs on trial and look at them on an individual level. And so I think it's trends over time. And then if hopefully you can see a trend, and then being able to look at closeout reports, it'll reduce some of the variability. But yeah, a lot of it is like long-term overall mortality trends, because it's so hard to pick up that power, and then you've got all those confounders. I'd probably, say, what Edison's doing with the Prosper project. You can tease some of that stuff out, remove some of those confounders, and maybe you can pick up a little bit more granularity on that mortality.
Would you say generally, like in this topic, with things that are more difficult to prove, that the industry or like the researchers in the industry like give a little bit more leniency to kind of like trusting just the numerical trends versus like needing to see a certain p-value, or do you still have to kind of hold everything to the same standard?
I'm pretty biased. I don't like over-interpreting trends, so I'm probably one who's going to want like more data and more significance. But I think it's super tempting because when you look at mortality, when you try to assign an ROI to whatever intervention you're doing, the ROI fluctuates dramatically specifically on mortality. So we can, gain's great, feed conversion's great, but mortality is what really moves the needle. So I think it's dangerous to interpret trends if you don't have the power, because that ROI change is so highly volatile.
Dr. Hansen, I'm sure you have a challenge for us.
It's a very short question, unlike Sheldon, who was wearing us out over there. No, on your hard to start pigs, you kind of went through that pretty quick, and you had a lot more hard to start pigs on the creep fed, and they weighed a pound more. And so as you look at that, I saw Roger sitting in here. It's 7 pounds per 1 pound of wean weight, right, Roger, or something like that at end of finishing. And so I look at that, and I don't understand how you decided on a hard to start pig and why there was so much weight difference at those kind of at the start or medium or whatever you want to look at. So I'm just curious, a little more context on the hard to start data.
Yeah, so really good question. For this specific trial, I mentioned this is a collaborative effort with our whole team. So this specific trial, I'd probably defer to our genetic team who did this analysis. But I will just say that we are doing a lot of work on the hard to start pig and looking at weight loss, weight gain, how we can impact that first 7 days. So I think we can probably get a better answer over the next year. What I should have done, I probably should have put the percentage of hard to start pigs on there, and I don't have that information, but I don't think that there was a statistical difference in hard to start pigs on creep versus no creep. But we could probably go back and look at that distribution of weights too to get you a better answer. So I don't know if that satisfies it, and follow up with our genetic team on how they did that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, any pig that had lost weight in the first 7 days is how we characterized that. Yep.
All right, so I won't pretend I have a short question, all right, Dr. Hansen? I want to come back to the labor issue. And one of the things we also look at with this Global Swine Benchmarking project is labor usage. And the U.S. uses labor very efficiently, meaning we use, 0.006 hours per kilogram pork produced is the rough estimate for the U.S. We're near the bottom there, or we use less labor even than a lot of countries in Europe that have a lot higher wage rates. So we're very efficient. On the other end of that scale is Vietnam. They use 0.05, so 0.006 versus 0.05. They're kind of an outlier. But there's a lot of things we've talked about here today. All of those things require labor, more labor, right? And Christine, we've talked about biosecurity too, right? There's a lot of things we'd like to do, we want to do, we probably or need to do, critical control points we need to get done. We don't probably have the labor all the time to do that, right? And so how do we address this? I guess my first question is, do we use enough labor? Do we need to use more? Or not, right? Maybe we're good where we are. So I don't know. I guess I'd open up that question to anybody in the audience too. So
for the dialogue discussion here, take some thoughts out of it. But if others in the room have thoughts, perspective on that.
One thing on the labor front and the gruel feeding, we looked at the gruel feeding the general pop and the whole barn compared to targeting gruel fed on the hard starters of the lighter pigs, and definitely on the when you gruel fed everybody, there was no impact of gruel feeding. But when you targeted that to the lighter end of the pigs and the harder starters, that was a significant return. So again, reducing labor, but targeting where that labor was used in our hands mattered.
What thoughts or experiences here in building on the theme of labor, that a lot of the practices, gruel feeding, creek feeding, mat feeding, walking pigs, pulling pigs, how have folks been successful in managing that labor, prioritizing? What areas of success in that regard would folks have?
Just a comment. Okay, sorry. Just a comment about the sanitation protocol, and it's an aspect that includes labor. I would expect that you found using a detergent cut down the labor in sanitation by a significant amount. And personal experience in that, we've seen that, and adding that detergent not only helps you clean better, but it makes your labor much more efficient.
Absolutely. Wash process time, 50% decrease on plastic floors. Yep.
On concrete.
I hope we'll see that. Yeah, good.
Christine, quick question for you on the sanitation, trailer sanitation for market pigs, and how that is working for the next groups that you guys are placing. How many, let's say, marketing breaks we will have with PD, and then re-breaks for wing pigs later?
Yeah, so market sanitation, I guess I didn't specify, but that wash process would be similar to our market sanitation process too. So detergent, hot water at 130 degrees, followed by, we're using Synergize, and then a TAD bake. Every single trailer would be. So that would be whether it's wean pig trailer, nursery to finish trailer, market trailer, run out load trailer, they're all getting washed and baked. So PED spread rate is 0%. And we've got a geofencing software that we use to kind of move trailers, verify that trailers aren't getting moved down. So I don't have a great PERS break incidence for you, but it would be very low. And I think a lot of that's due to the sanitation. Now, we audited the truck wash, and I think there's probably some room for improvement there too on execution of the sanitation protocols, but it's better than not washing.
Christine, you mentioned 6 times a day mat feeding. Is that every 4 hours, 24 hours? Or how do you do the labor there?
We are not mat feeding 6 times a day. That trial did. So that was a pilot trial to look at that. I think we're probably getting close to 3. So it'd be like first walk through, they get mat fed right before break, and then probably once before they go home. Because the labor, I think to your point, we've got 1 FTE per 7,000 nursery pigs, and just can't get that 6 times a day.
And then your PERS vaccinations, did you stop doing those or just adjust the timing on that vaccination?
I would say we're unique in our area to have fairly low PERS pressure and low PERS incidence. So for majority of those, we just pulled PERS vaccine.
And one more, you mentioned you had Synergize only, stressed that, Synergize only.
Yes, so feel really good about the mechanism of action with Synergize and the pathogens that we target in our system. And we're getting a lot of variation on purchasing of other products, and people felt the need to rotate products, so a lot of it was just to maintain consistency. Yep.
Maybe tying 2 together, the sanitation part and mat feeding, using rubber mats versus maybe the biodegradable board. Using rubber mats, do you replace those on a regular cadence, or what's your standard operating there?
Oh, I'd love to have an in-depth conversation on mats. But so we are using rubber mats, and a lot of that is just for cost. They don't break down. They can be reused, power washed. But I think that they're a cesspool mess. So we've pulled them in farrowing completely. So we don't use them there at all. And we are just using them the first, 3 to 5 days in Gen Pop, 7 days to 10 days in sick pens, and then we're getting those pulled because it's very hard to get those clean. Yeah. If we have a break, we toss them and buy new. Yeah.
Of all the information in different topic areas, for those in the field, in barns, working at slat level and such, what are some areas that we may not have covered or may not have seen data on today that you may have tried in your farms with your producers? What areas or experiences have you been seeing is working in this area to keep pigs in the nursery going?
This is back to you. If you had the opportunity to mat feed 6 times a day and labor wasn't a concern, would you do it, or do you think 3 times a day is sufficient?
Well, I think some of the data that was presented earlier would suggest maybe we don't need to do 6 times a day. A benefit would be you're walking pigs more frequently and probably identifying at-risk pigs to pull and treat. So for the mat feeding specifically, probably don't. I don't know, but based on that data, I would say don't need to. But I think it helps identify pigs.
Sorry to keep asking questions, but on the sanitation front, I noticed that you apply the detergent prior to removing organic matter versus removing organic matter, applying the detergent to attack the biofilm. Did you look at that at all, when to apply that detergent?
We do ask them to try and get the big organic matter out. So if it's in farrowing, we'll ask them to scrape crates, run soakers for 5 to 10 minutes, and in the nursery we'd run, we'd wet it down. We don't want to power wash. I think you lose out on the power wash time by doing the power wash first and then the detergent. But on big sow farm cleanups, we might do that. Yeah. Well, we've used 5 different products. And I would say that we've not picked up a dramatic difference in efficacy. So maybe to save brand preference, we could talk about that offline. But I think all of them have been pretty efficacious.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. This actually isn't a question for you, Dr. Christine, even though I enjoy your comments. For Jordan and the rest of the extension personnel or academic groups, how are y'all getting more labor to these companies and enticing students to go into the swine industry and showing them that there's a future and getting them excited about the Livability project and different things?
I'm being nominated. All right. So it's it's time's up. All right. I got my sign. I got, the micromanager on time up here. Yeah, we are. But it's exposure. And a lot of it has to do with, it's no different. I know Iowa State, there's lots of universities have undergrad swine clubs. I guess, what day is it? Last Monday, we met with ours at K-State, and we have routinely 15 to 20 students show up. The reality is, of that, there's 3 or 4 that come from a commercial background, and all the rest come from a youth livestock background. Okay? And we had a really good discussion with those that had internships. One, Jack had an internship with PIC. He was at Brenneman Pork last summer. They offered him, and he just took a job. Jack came from Arizona, showed pigs, was involved in the NJSA, no commercial background, and that's a huge success story, getting him, and he'll be a research type person with PIC. We had those discussions. I'll use my own example. I'm fortunate my kids are interested in ag. I grew up with livestock in South Dakota on a livestock farm, but we were an acreage farm. But my kids are going that way, and my daughter had an internship with Christine in the Pillen group last summer. And I mean, you just got to foster those opportunities. I'd say the biggest change is for many of you to be intentional about your internships and offer those. There is kids that are falling over to get these experiences. And we just got to help match them up. So what do we do on our side? When we get messages all the time, and we get it to our undergrads about different internships, and a lot of you sponsor those. But I'll also say, if you do a bad job at an internship, those students talk quick, and we've had some, man, we just can't get kids to apply for ours. Okay? It isn't something we're doing, they talk. All right? So if you're going to do them, you have to do them right. And I realize it's a hassle for a lot of people. It's another time commitment. But if you're going to pull them into production systems or in our ag businesses, you better do them right or don't do them, because you will develop a reputation in your company amongst those college-age students not to go to this place. And if you're having a hard time on internships, there's lots of young professionals looking for them. You better maybe evaluate what you're doing. I'll just be blunt on that one. And so back to the point, we had a round table, we talked internships, they're talking about different opportunities, but we still have to tap into those that love pigs, and they just don't know the careers. And I'm passionate on the youth livestock side, along with our commercial farms that many of you work with. That is a group, if you look at the grad students, you look at even a lot of the swine veterinarians, their path to the swine industry has been being the acreage family, showing a few livestock, whatever that is. That population is massive in our U.S. that want potential careers. We got to help them figure out what it is, because they're not exposed to it. Okay? So that's what we're trying to do. I know other universities try that. But then we just have to have good internships. You know, the days of showing up on internship and the first day, you're pulling deads, picking up, after birth, and you're just you're just a laborer not being taught, but you're just a laborer. You do that, those days are done. Like, you have to make them understand the opportunity and advancement, and all that's part of it. I mean, they got to do the daily grind, just like every one of us have put our time in. They got to put their time in to understand. But we just got to keep working. That group, to me, is a big part of it. I mean, let's do this. How many people in here grew up with 4-H or FFA and showed livestock at some level? Okay. Why are you in the swine industry today? Maybe had something to do with that. That group we have to continue. And I'll give Pork Board, it's going to be interesting. They just hired, so they advertised, they had 150 applicants. 150 applicants for a new show. It's basically a show pig liaison hired by Pork Board to help work that group. 150 applicants. That is a pool, again, that we just need to keep tapping into, and it's exposure, working with there's lots of universities here. You got to be intentional with the faculty in swine. If you want to get a pool of internships, you got to get with the faculty at the different universities. We send it out to our pig groups. I mean, other groups do the same. If you just try and do a general whatever, you're going to get whatever. Get it to the faculty that can get to the students. We can talk to them about it. So, sorry I've rambled here. My time's up. So, all right. Yeah, good point, Rafe. So I would say, again, back to most universities have developed very good undergrad research opportunities. So, I mean, at K-State, we have a class. I mean, we used to do research with individual students that wanted it. We have a class every semester, and there's about 25 to 30 students. And we have, there's ones that want swine. We do a swine project every semester with undergrads. There's meat science, food science, ruminant nutrition. The sheep and goat people, they go crazy because they love to do research on goats. But it's that many, and they do a poster, and they help with the whole process. Other universities are doing the same, and so again, and those need some baseline funding, because there's just, we'd love to say these universities are just flush with cash, but the reality is there's baseline dollars needed, and some people develop, a grad student, they develop. I mean, Peyton Dahmer at K-State's a good opportunity. He went through that, helped with those classes. It was part of his master's and his PhD projects, and he had leadership with that. So the undergrad research opportunities at universities has dramatically been a game changer, I'd say, the last 5 to 7 years for a lot of places.
Yeah, I'll speak more on the veterinary side, I guess, here, but I absolutely agree about the internship. So we have a food animal veterinary internship program, so swine, bovine, poultry, and now we have a rural mixed animal one as well. And the best way to hook a student on swine or bovine or poultry medicine is to get them out and have an intern. And I agree with you too. We do have some occasionally have a bad experience with that, right? And they're gone. You don't get them back. And but I will add a couple things. There is no such thing as a shortage. We should probably avoid using that term. It's only supply and demand, right? And one of the things I think we're struggling with now is what we're paying, right? And we've tried to continue up even what we're paying for these internships, because we found students chose to go work in an Amazon warehouse for the summer instead of doing an internship because they had student loans they are worried about, right? And so they did that instead, right? And that's a shame that happens. So we're trying to get that up, and then same with starting salaries now. You know, I don't know how long this will last, but small animal veterinarians are making a lot more. They get signing bonuses. It's just not that appealing for swine veterinarians. So, sorry?
4 days a week.
Yeah, well, yeah. And it's from a work-life balance, I guess. It's more appealing to them. So, but I will say one thing. The thing we're really struggling with is just getting them in the door, right? Because last year it was a mad scramble. We didn't have really enough good applicants, I'm going to say, or high-quality applicants. We had more positions, internship positions, than we had good applicants in swine. It was a mad scramble to line those up. And so I'm concerned about that. We did start an early acceptance program here now too. We don't even fill all those spots, right? So yeah, it's supply and demand, but we're having troubles getting them in the door.
Yeah, I would say with that too, we talk about the young, college age and high school. I'll even go back to high school. I would challenge you, if you're in an area, what do you do with the FFA programs in the high schools? There's a lot of them that could potentially just come straight working for you. It's not about additional education for a big population, right? I'm in that business, but I'll be the last to say everybody needs to go on by any means. That's not for the jobs they want. How many of you spend time, you don't think the ag teacher would love to have you come in and talk about your business instead of them lecturing and the students listen to the ag teacher one more time, just like they have to listen to Jordan in class? Geez, gets a little nauseating, right? So, get guest lectures. How many do that? Think about that. That gets that in. The biggest problem too now is as we go every generation, now my grandparents had pigs or cattle, and then it's going to be great because every year that students are coming, we're another generation away from when they actually knew what livestock are. But these animal science students keep coming because they love animals, okay? It isn't the students. We have to convince the parents that these jobs are okay for their son or daughter too, because they don't understand what commercial swine is. They don't. And as all you out here that are parents, you want your kids to make sure they're in a career that long-term they're going to feel good about, all the things. We got to convince the parents, or I shouldn't say convince, we have to educate parents that these jobs in the swine industry are good jobs, because they're as naive as the students coming through. And the parents will have, obviously, some influence on, yeah, you sure you want to do pigs, right? We got to make sure they're okay with it, too. And so this is back to that local education. We can't just wait till it's college time. It has to be done locally and to spur interest. Yeah, good example. Sorry, I'm rambling, time's up, but Jacob Kanoy, he's a master's student. He's with us now. He's from Indiana. I don't think Jacob, I don't know if he's in the room. He's probably in the other room. How did he get his experience? When during COVID, he started working at a local swine producer's farm in high school. That's how he got his experience, went to Purdue. Now he's with us on a master's program. That's how it happened. His bus driver had a pig farm. Started working for him in high school, rolled into a swine career. Locally, it has to be done. It can't wait till it's college time. Go ahead.
Before our time is up, I'd like to explore some possible research areas that some of these master's students and PhDs can work on. For the last 5-10 years, I've been doing research in a controlled environment as well as field studies on omega-3 fatty acids as it's affecting performance primarily. But now we're starting to look at how the ratio of 6:3 and the actual level of omega-3s will affect animal health. And there's always a question of what variables do we measure, how do we measure them, so forth and so on. And we're starting to do some of those controlled studies there, and we would love to team up with the universities. I know Dr. Rosero has a real interest in omega-3s, visit with him. I know you've mentioned it in your presentation, Dr. Jordan, of that interest. We've talked to the folks at K-State in the past. This is a real interest, at least in our clientele that we work with, in how do we improve health. And what we have seen with the omega-3 is that we can mediate some of the symptoms of PRRS by feeding the proper ratios of 6:3. So I wanted to ask you, would Kansas State, would Iowa State have some interest in pursuing any research that we might be able to do in that area?
I'd say that on our team at K-State, been involved with a little bit of that research, did a couple of studies, one at the university, one in the field. But I really appreciate that, and I think that there's a lot of things to continue to explore. Omega-6-3s and some of the ratio and some of the piece there, not only from the performance side, livability, what that's doing in the body, certainly an area to explore further. And I think there's a lot of those areas. And here in 10 minutes or so left, and I'm not going to be the one to hold everybody up from getting to a break, but appreciate that thought, and really the next few minutes hope to gather some feedback. What from everybody that in the room, what areas of thoughts, feedback, what research priorities would you see as being important to work on, both for as part of the project, but also to stimulate some discussion and some ideas collectively amongst everybody. So if you hear something good today, you can take it back into your production system and explore things. So a few areas that I'd like to work on with that here with the few minutes we have remaining.
Yeah, with the realization that lactation space is generally the key constraint on many of the breeding herds that exist in the U.S. today, as far as relative of gestation space to lactation craze, and lactation space being constraining to lactation length, right? And there's certainly places of the world where 4-week weaning is norm, right? And I don't know, I didn't really quite fully understand it, but even if you think about the discussion we heard yesterday with Dr. Laura's presentation, and she was talking about, well, we have 3-week batches, but we're weaning 4-week-old pigs. So how does that work? Okay, well, how that works is they have 2 every 3 weeks. They have a batch, and so they're weaning half of their lactation space every 3 weeks. So what that means is you have 6 weeks of lactation capacity to wean the 4-week pig, right? And typically we would think about you probably give up a week of actual, right, based on your capacity. And so my question really is like, but that's a very structurally different thing, right? To have that much lactation capacity, and I just wonder about like, is there any interest of further evaluating that impact of something that a very different aged pig, and better understanding and realizing that would take a very substantive impact, influx of capital investment, just to say, is that something that would be of interest to people to look at further?
I have a request or a question for the suppliers and the universities in the room, is that when you share the information, can you give us detail about any interactions? If Steve or I or Omar or Gene here, when we go forth and use products or technologies that are available, right? We typically do it as a single trait, right? But when we go to apply things, we're often have to look at vaccines, water interventions, or feed interventions, and we seldom understand how they interact. So I think it'd be helpful for us to understand when we share information, what other things, if it's vaccination protocols, water, interventions, or whatever, because I think that's part of the whole story for the livability. We're doing all these little small changes, and I don't think we always know them. So sharing that, I think, would be useful for an industry to understand how they apply to us across it.
We must be short on comments when Dr. Hastad has to make comments, so, all right.
As an industry person, I have I think a response to that interest of like understanding how our products are interacting with things that are commonly used in that same space. And that's something that our group had discussions on around a product. And from a pharmaceutical standpoint, I think a lot of the reason that you find that vendors don't have that data that's available to share is because it would require a pharmacokinetic study. And a lot of, and including us, it's a expensive step to do. I think it's not necessarily a happy medium, but it's an effort that vendors can make is if you, for example, have water-soluble products, it's understanding, okay, if I mix this water under different conditions and different levels of solutes and different treatments, how does that impact the solubility and mixability of my product? And the recommendation's never going to be to deviate from however a pharmaceutical manufacturer tells you to prepare medications, but still try to understand if something gets mixed in with this water-soluble product, how does that behave? Or if I'm doing a feed ingredient, do I have issues with pelleting or any other kind of feed processing that could impact the flowability of that feed? So I think that is on the vendors to take those extra steps and make sure that our products we're offering are as headache-free as they can be.
Okay, Chad, so if I gave you all of those interactions, does that mean you're just going to implement when I present that data to you? Or are you going to want to run your own study again? Exactly. That's a real dilemma, right?
The challenge we have is, right, we're running a water vaccination at the same time we're using a probiotic and we're using a zinc mineral that kills it. Which one's working? And then we're going to talk about
Whatever I'm selling you. No, it's a really difficult. That's a really difficult one.
I'm just saying, don't just share with me. I'll make the choice, right? But we all do it differently, right? But I think we have to start telling me, hey, we did this study with X, Y, Z, and here's the other things that we did. We vaccinated the pigs on day 4. We ran this in the feed, and so forth. Okay, then show me the data, right? Then we can start unfolding that as individuals, I think. But if we don't ever talk about, we only talk about the main effects of treatment A and B, but you did, C through Z, they might have had an impact on us. But I think we got to talk about it if we're going to talk about livability.
So that's the conditions of what was used in that project, right? And so that's absolutely should be addressed. The better question I would get to, Chad, is when I was in your position, how would I, and I look at my current role, what would I have done differently? The ability to invest, so is Dustin Kendall in this room? I'll speak
No,
for
he's
him.
not here.
Oh, good. So I'll talk like I'm him.
He missed the meeting of the gray hairs, so.
The investment of time that you're going to put into understanding those is the dilemma, right? And that's the real difficulty with me as a seller. Can I replace that time? It's not going to be complete, but that is the dilemma. You're going to have to invest a little more time as our numbers in industry start diminishing, right? As you categorically start commoditizing everything. I don't know why you guys do that. I don't, yeah, any of that, you know.
All right, time's up on him. All right.
You taught us how.
So I would say, and to add to that, on the vaccine timing, you know, we've been involved with those. Dr. Megan Potter did that as part of her PhD. That is one, and I know a lot of people have done that type of work. But we know clearly how pigs get set, those little piglets get set back, depending on how many we give, the timing, is it at weaning, and it's really around labor a lot of times, which is logical. But those interactions on vaccine timing is monumental in a lot of the things we do. I mean, we're just setting up a study, and they want to, work with the company. When you give the shots, we're going to change it a little bit so it's, doesn't fit the times of the protocols we need to do with their product. I mean, it's to your point, Chad. Those are things we need to probably be better at reporting, because the vaccine timing, without a doubt, for me, is one that plays in, that often we talk about everything else, and that's the one at times, not every time, interacts with responses that we're trying to get to, especially when it comes to growth and some of that. So feed intake, yep. All right. One last comment, we'll wrap her up.
So just a comment and a challenge is more life cycle crossover research, I think, is important. So I think like Nick Gabler's done some, K-State's done some of what happens in farrowing or in lactation on that piglet. What's the outcome in the nursery or nursery into finisher? And more of that sort of work, I think, is critical as we move forward as well. We can't just stop at one stage of production and assume that everything's great thereafter. I think there's interactions that we probably don't understand.
Well, that'll wrap up our post-weaning, our nursery breakout session here this morning. Very much appreciate all of our speakers that were able to be part of it, provide some information. Hopefully the dialogue doesn't end here. We continue to have that throughout break and throughout the rest of the conference, generating ideas, stimulating ideas, what works, what hasn't worked, and where could and should we go forward to try to address nursery livability. Thanks for joining this morning.